To install the Fypon beam end caps and top, you will need the following tools: a measuring tape, a square, a jigsaw with a 45-degree cutting angle and a fine-tooth blade, a rasp, a small planer, a round file, adhesive, a caulk gun, painter's tape, and safety glasses. First, measure your beam and beam top to the length required. Using a square, mark the beam on the sides, bottom, and beam top at the desired cut length. Square the beam using cut blocks of polyurethane or other material along the length of the beam. This will ensure proper alignment of the beam top. Using the jigsaw with a fine-tooth blade, cut the beam and beam top to the marked length, cutting all sides of the beam. To ensure a straight cut, you can use the square as a guide. Turn the beam with the open cavity facing upward and place the beam top on the beam to ensure the beam top and beams are at the same length. If any minor trimming is required on either the beam or the beam top, this should be done now. After the beam and beam top have been cut, use tape in several places along the length of the beam or clamp the beam top to the open beam. Place the smooth side of the beam end cap against the end of the beam. Determine which portion of the beam end cap facade you want to capture based on your preference. Holding the smooth side of the beam end cap to the cut beam end and beam top, trace the outline of the beam and beam top onto the end cap. Designate the beam end cap as top and bottom with marks B for bottom, T for top. Using the jigsaw, cut the beam end cap along the marked line on the smooth side of the beam end cap. After the beam end cap has been cut, move the jigsaw bevel gauge to a 45-degree angle. You are going to miter cut the beam end cap with the grain side up. Make sure the miter is placed at the correct angle. Begin cutting by following the grain profile, using the painted edge as your guide. Now, cut the beam top to fit the beam end cap at the same miter angle. Cut at a slight angle to follow the curve of the beam top. Be careful when you reach the edge of the beam top. Extra material can be trimmed as needed. Now miter the beam to accept the end cap. With the open side of the beam facing you and using the same miter angle as the beam end cap, begin cutting the beam side. Turn the beam with the open side facing away from you and begin cutting the other side using the same miter angle. Rotate the beam so the open end is sitting flat on a work surface. Start cutting at a slight angle until you can get a straight 45-degree angle and cut into the bottom of the beam. To clean up the corners of the bottom edge of the beam, change the direction of the miter to the opposite 45-degree angle and begin cutting around the beam bottom. Turn the beam as you go around it. Place the beam top back onto the beam, tape in place, and dry fit the cut beam end cap to the beam. Determine where the beam top and beam must be filed for the beam end cap to fit securely. Using a rasp and/or file, shave the interior of the beam miter along the bottom, corners, and sides of the beam. Do the same for the beam top. Again, dry fit the beam end cap to the beam and beam top. Determine where you need to sand the beam end cap to achieve a finished fit. Starting with the grain side up, use a rasp and/or file to shave the mitered edges on the beam end cap where necessary. Again, fit the beam end cap to the beam and beam top and continue to sand as needed for the final fit. Once you are satisfied with your final fit, file the edges of the beam end cap to flow seamlessly into the beam and beam top. Repeat these steps for the other end of the beam. Now, place a thin bead of adhesive PL Premium along the edges of the beam top and place the beam top on the beam. Tape in place. Now place a thin bead of adhesive PL Premium along the mitered edge of the beam end cap and beam. Wipe away any squeeze out of the adhesive. Using painter's tape, tape the beam end cap to the beam to secure the beam end cap until the adhesive dries. Use recommended drying time specified by the adhesive manufacturer. Once the adhesive dries, your beam is ready to paint or stain and then install. If desired, after the adhesive dries, you can also use a finish nail gun to assure the beam end is secure. Use small finishing nails with proper PSI settings based on the nail gun used.